us for another Wednesday morning press conference. Shootings continue to be a challenge for our community, affecting real members of our community and neighbors. And with that, you expect the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department to be doing something about it. Here with us this morning is Major Ryan Butler, who's going to discuss some of those efforts we are making, as well as some of the successes that we are seeing already. Major?
Thanks, Steve. Good morning, everyone. I appreciate you calling in or following us on social media this morning. As Lieutenant Fishback indicated, this year we've had over 400 assault with a deadly weapon cases involving a firearm. It's about a 31% increase over last year. We have had 659 people victimized by shooting into occupied property cases. Those are situations where a home or a vehicle has been shot into. We've had 5 of those cases investigated just since yesterday alone. In order to address this extreme community concern, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department Special Investigation Bureau has merged several of our units together because of the specialized experience that they have. Those units are the Shooting in Occupied Dwelling Task Force, due to their experience and familiarity in shooting cases and shooting series investigations. Our gang unit, those detectives have experience investigating organized crime structures, and our trap unit, which is our targeted response and apprehension unit, which has a deep experience in apprehending and seeking out individuals who are wanted, particularly for felonious crimes. Those 3 units have been brought together to create our crime gun suppression team. The ability of these detectives to work together is not just in solely in an investigative capacity, it's in support to our patrol units, in support to our patrol detectives. But the key to the work that this unit does is going to be the ballistic evidence that is generated by our own crime lab. Just to give you an example, if we were out on a scene today, we've spoken to many of you on scene, and we talk about our crime scene investigators and detectives searching for and collecting physical evidence. Well, in these cases particularly, we're looking at collecting ballistic evidence. So spent shell casings, fired projectiles, and firearms. Those pieces of evidence would be brought back to the law enforcement center today. They'd be entered into property control, and within 24 hours, we would have those up in the lab and entering that evidence into NIBIN, which is the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. That's a national network that's run by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And what that evidence allows us to do is track cases across multiple incidents. And that's not just local, that's national. So if we have fired evidence from one case that, say, occurs in North Division, we have the potential of matching that up with a firearm that was used in that case, as well as a case anywhere else in the city, in the region, or nationally. And this helps direct our detectives on the crime gun suppression team to go after those individuals who are not involved in an isolated incident, but who are involved in multiple cases that are connected. This unit played a critical role over the weekend in responding to the shooting that we had at North Lake Mall, helping to make the identification of the shooter, and then in less than 12 hours, assisting patrol units into taking that individual into custody without any harm to anyone involved. This unit also works closely with our crime analysis unit. We have a dedicated analyst that works with our crime gun suppression team detectives, reviewing intelligence, reviewing evidence across cases, reviewing a variety of source information that we get in, and it really helps us to focus our response so that we can ensure that our resources are being used most intelligently, most intentionally to address the violent crime. You know, that part of the key, in addition to our ballistic evidence, is that this is a behavior-based approach. It's not going after someone just because someone has a criminal history. This is us focusing on people who are currently engaging in violent crime, particularly related to shootings that are occurring in our city. We also have a strong relationship with our district attorney's office. We work closely with an assigned assistant district attorney related to the cases that are generated by the crime gun suppression team. So I really think you're starting to get a picture of how holistic this is. You know, we're really trying to break down the silos, both internally and externally, make sure we're sharing information, make sure that we're operating in conjunction with all of our patrol and investigative units to obtain the optimum outcomes for our city. At this time, I'll take any questions that you might have. I appreciate you joining us this morning.
Oh. Sorry, can I ask a question, or can we just?
Yes,
okay, great. Sorry. This is Paige Peroso from WBTV. A quick question about why do you think there's been an increase in these kinds of investigations? You said 5 over the last couple of days, I believe is what you said. What could you point to? Is it gang crime? Is it an increase in guns on the streets? Is there a reason for it?
You know, Paige, that's something we've talked about a lot over the last year. Obviously, and not even just as a country, you know, internationally, we're operating under some very unique circumstances due to the pandemic and the way that's affected our large social systems. You know, I think nationally you've seen an increase in violent crime, and I think again that relates to the fact that these systems, whether it be changes in business, changes in schools, changes in our court system that have caused disruptions in our normal, you know, processing of our lives, regardless of what we do. So I think that there are a variety of factors, and this is something that we will probably be studying, you know, for generations as to the causal effects of what's brought us to this point. But the reality is that we know we're experiencing it. We have to address it. That is our obligation to, you know, the citizens of Charlotte-Mecklenburg County. And I think this shows the deep commitment that CMPD has to making a change in this area.
Paige has her hand still raised.
Any follow-up there, Paige?
Yeah, just one more question. You know, 2019, we had a near record-breaking year for homicides in Charlotte. 2020, you know, beat that number. Here in 2021, we're still tracking kind of on that same, you know, similar numbers that we saw in 2020 to date. Are you fearful that it could happen again in 2021? And I guess, how does the police department continue to work to try and stop, you know, that from happening, I guess?
Well, I think this shows that we take this issue very seriously. I mean, I can tell you, having been in patrol previous to my current assignment in special investigations, that the SIOD task force model really paid dividends. And I think that's because, again, it's behavior based. So again, not looking at someone necessarily because they have a criminal history, but looking at someone because we can show through particularly our ballistic evidence that people are currently engaged in violent gun crime, and that's where our resources need to be addressed. So we're adding additional resources from a detective standpoint with the crime gun suppression team, but we're working very closely, and there have been additional resources allocated in our crime lab to make sure that we can get this ballistic evidence in promptly. Our analysts and our crime lab technicians can generate leads. So on a almost daily basis, you'll see leads coming out from the crime lab, which show indications that firearms and ballistic evidence or collected ballistic evidence is related from multiple cases. So we're not just making inferences, we have tangible physical evidence that show the relationship across related shooting incidents, and that's where we're putting our resources, so that our Criminal Investigations Bureau, our patrol detectives, our patrol officers, our crime reduction units are all working in conjunction, and the crime gun suppression team will continue to support those units as well as identifying and helping to lead the investigations in these shooting series. Okay. Mr. Becker, do you have a question, sir?
Yeah, good morning. And I hate to go off in another direction, but I don't know if you're the one to answer this, Major, or not. I did want to follow up on the investigation of yesterday's federal marshal shooting. I know CMPD is doing that investigation. If you're not the guy to answer it, I don't know if there's someone there who can, but where do we stand with that? And one of the questions I had is whether the members of that task force were wearing BWC's body cameras.
Sure. Mark, real quick, I just want to make sure that we didn't have any other questions related to the crime gun suppression team. Once I can answer those, I'm going to turn the podium over to Captain Joel McNally from our homicide unit.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm sorry to steer that direction, but I wanted to make sure we could get to somebody on that. Thank you.
No problem at all, sir. Okay, if there are no other questions about crime gun suppression team, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Captain Joel McNally from our homicide unit.
Good morning, everyone. Captain Joel McNally with the CMPD Homicide Unit. And Mark, you had a question?
Yeah, Captain, a couple actually. Thank you. Where do we stand with the investigation? And one of the questions I would have is, were members of that task force, the marshals, wearing body cameras as a matter of course?
Okay, thank you. We are still very early in this investigation. Our detectives are working tirelessly late into the night last night and back in early this morning working on that. We're uncovering every piece of evidence, video, physical, and otherwise, including witness statements, and literally every piece that we can find of anything. Not prepared to discuss the particulars of what evidence we do and don't have at this time. But I can tell you that we are investigating every piece of that. And also, if there are any particular personnel matters regarding the U.S. Marshal Service, we would want to refer those matters to the U.S. Marshal Service.
Understood. Let me follow up with that. I mean, yeah, I'm sorry. Just to follow up, though, can you tell us whether they wear body cameras? And B, can you tell us, we understand the gun was recovered. Was it in the glove box, or where was that gun recovered?
Yeah, again, at this time, we're not prepared to talk about the particulars of any kind of pieces of evidence, including any kind of body cameras. We did release yesterday that there was a gun recovered, but because of the position of this investigation right now, we're not prepared to discuss exact details on the condition or location of that. Paige, you had a question?
Yes, thanks, Captain. This is Paige from WBTV. Can you tell us more about the warrants that the deputies were trying to serve on Mr. Jennings? And is that deputy on leave, or is that what you're regarding? We'd have to talk to the U.S. Marshal Service for that, those matters.
Yeah, sure. That would be a personnel matter within the U.S. Marshal Service. So I would refer you to them for their policies, on any kind of leave or anything like that. I can answer your question on the warrants that we were serving. A bit of a list, and I guess I can have our folks put that out to you in detail. But they included 3 warrants out of Carolina Beach, North Carolina, that were assault with a deadly weapon on a government official, flee to elude arrest with a motor vehicle, and reckless driving. 5 warrants out of Charlotte, including 6 warrants, 2 possession of firearm by felon, breaking and entering, discharging a firearm in city limits, assault on a female, and damage to property. And then in addition to that, there were 6 traffic warrants out of York County, South Carolina, and a possession of marijuana warrant out of York County, South Carolina as well.
Captain, just clarify that it's U.S. Marshals that were serving those warrants, not us.
That's correct. Yeah, just to clarify that all of those warrants, the attempt at service on those warrants was the U.S. Marshals. There were not any CMPD personnel on that scene until after the incident had happened, when we came in to assist with the investigation and secure the area. Amanda?
Hey, good morning. Can you describe generally what the communication is like between the U.S. Marshals Service and CMPD? And was CMPD aware that the warrant was being served that day?
Yeah, again, all of that's part of our ongoing investigation right now. Obviously, all law enforcement agencies in the area have communication with one another. As far as the communication that was happening yesterday morning, that's still part of our investigation. We're looking at any kind of radio traffic, phone calls, anything else that might be out there. there was any kind of communication between that task force and CMPD. But again, CMPD was not involved with the initial scene. However, CMPD officers did arrive within minutes to assist in the investigation after the shooting.
And can you explain how CMPD came to arrive at the scene? Was that from radio traffic, from 911 calls? How did they get there?
At this time, again, I'm sorry, but again, that's part of our initial investigation right now. We're diving into all of those areas to determine exactly how that communication laid out. Lana Harris.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. So there was obviously talk in the community about CMPD's role in this. There's obviously trust there, and people were talking about how you all are assisting in this investigation, and now you're the entity as well investigating the incident. So can you explain that role, how that works, how you are assisting in the investigation and investigating the shooting itself versus an outside entity? Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. As we're the originating agency with jurisdiction to investigate any kind of crimes that happen within Charlotte and the areas of Mecklenburg County that we cover. And so by default, we are the investigating agency. Like any of these other shootings, the agencies involved could ask for an investigation by, say, the SBI or the FBI or something, but those requests were not made. So as the originating agency, we were the investigating agency, and so that is our role. Amanda, another question?
Hey, thanks again. Can you explain who would be making the request of the SBI to investigate this situation?
Any of those kind of requests would be made by the supervisory staff of the agency involved. So in this case, it would be if there were a different request. Again, by default, we are the investigating agency. If they were to request that, that would come from the head U.S. Marshal here in Charlotte.
And can you explain why the name of the deputy involved isn't being released right now?
Yeah, sure. Again, as part of our active investigation, we have not completely finished interviewing everyone involved and looking at every piece of evidence. In a CMPD shooting, it's our responsibility as the agency. If one of our officers is involved, it's the responsibility of our agency to release that information. And so we would defer to the U.S. Marshal's office for the release of a name or any other personnel information that you might request. Amanda?
All right, thank you again. Can you speak to any concerns that CMPD isn't able to remain as sort of an independent agency here? It sounds like the victim in this case has warrants out of Charlotte. It sounds like the marshal collaborates with CMPD regularly. Can you sort of speak to anyone who would have some concerns about whether CMPD would be able to remain unbiased and independent in this investigation?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think the first and most important thing is that we are an agency that is completely independent to this particular incident. In other words, we did not have any officers there until the incident was complete, at which point we helped with locking down a crime scene. And so we really only got involved in the investigative portion of this crime. So we are an independent agency investigating this. You know, just to be straight with you, we're going to be we're going to look at every single piece of evidence. We're going to leave nothing unturned. It doesn't matter whether it's a homicide somewhere else involving normal citizens or a shooting incident involving a law enforcement officer. We're going to be objective and do a comprehensive investigation, and that investigative packet will be submitted to the district attorney's office. We also have the district attorney's office with us all the way through the investigation from start to finish on scene and as we process everything. So there's yet another layer of independence watching over and overseeing the investigation.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us this morning. You heard Major Butler talk about the crime gun suppression team. You and the community can be part of that effort as well. Crime Stoppers, 704-334-1600. Thank you.